Name the most important company in the world. Go on, say it out loud. You probably said Apple, maybe Nvidia, maybe Google. You're wrong. And here's the strange part. The real answer is a company you can't buy anything from. No app, no phone, no gadget on your shelf. Most people on Earth can't even pronounce its name. It sits on one island, and if it vanished tomorrow morning, your phone would die. Your next car wouldn't get built. The entire AI boom, every chatbot, every data center, every trillion-dollar promise would freeze mid-sentence. The company is called TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. And here's what nobody tells you. Apple and Nvidia don't sit at the top of the food chain. TSMC does. The giants you worship, they work for it. Let me show you how that happened. Let's do a simple test. You wake up, you check your phone, there's a TSMC chip in it. You unlock your car, TSMC chip. You open your laptop, TSMC chip. The AI you asked a dumb question to before coffee, running on a warehouse full of TSMC chips. You've touched this company a dozen times before breakfast, and you've never once seen its name. Here's how the trick works. Look at the back of your iPhone. It says, designed by Apple in California. Read it again. Designed, not made. Apple draws the blueprint. A factory in Taiwan turns that blueprint into a rectangle the size of your fingernail, holding tens of billions of microscopic switches, each one flipping on and off billions of times a second. A thing more complex than anything humans have ever built, smaller than a coin. That factory is TSMC. Now run the same test on Nvidia. Those AI chips everyone is fighting over, the ones that turned Nvidia into one of the most valuable companies on the planet? Nvidia designs them. It does not make a single one. TSMC does. So here's the paradox. The most powerful company in tech is invisible, precisely because everyone else depends on it. You don't see TSMC. You see the logos of its customers. Call it the ghost in the machine. The one brand you never see is the one holding the whole thing up. So how does one company end up with this much power? For that, we go back to 1987. A man named Morris Chang has an idea so boring it sounds like a joke. Chang isn't a kid in a garage. He's in his 50s. He spent decades in America, near the top of one of the biggest chip companies in the world. Then he gets a call from Taiwan, a place with no real chip industry, asking him to build one from nothing. And his idea is this. Back then, if you wanted to make computer chips, you had to do everything yourself. Design them, and build the factory to manufacture them. And those factories were monsters. Billions of dollars, years to build, half obsolete the day they opened. So only giants could play. Intel, a few others. If you were a brilliant engineer with a genius design and no factory of your own, tough luck. Game over before you started. Chang's move was the opposite of everything. What if there was a factory that only manufactured and never, ever designed its own chips? A kitchen that cooks any dish you bring it, but never puts a single plate on its own menu. Everyone thought it was backwards. Why would a factory deliberately refuse to make its own products? Because that refusal was the entire point. Chang made a promise to the world's engineers. Send me your designs. I will build them perfectly. I will never steal them. And I will never sell a chip with my name against yours. That one promise was the unlock. Suddenly you didn't need $10 billion and a factory to start a chip company. You needed a good idea. TSMC would build it. And a wave of companies appeared that had been flat out impossible before. Companies that only design and never manufacture. Nvidia, Qualcomm, AMD. Later, Apple's own chip team. Think about that. Half the legends of modern tech only exist because one factory in Taiwan agreed to stay in the background and never compete with them. TSMC didn't win the chip war. It quietly became the battlefield everyone else has to fight on, but becoming the battlefield wasn't enough. To stay there, TSMC had to win a second war, a race almost nobody outside the industry has heard of. The race to smaller. Here's the rule of the game. The smaller you can shrink a transistor, the more you cram onto one chip, and the faster and cheaper everything gets. So chip makers measure progress in nanometers. A nanometer is a billionth of a meter. The leading edge today is down around 3 nanometers, features so small you're stacking switches just a handful of atoms apart. And this race has a vicious twist. It's winner take most. Whoever reaches the next size first gets every premium customer, because Apple and Nvidia always want the newest, fastest chip for their flagship product. Fall just one generation behind, and you don't lose a little business. You lose all of it. Customers don't wait. That's the engine of the monopoly. TSMC got to the front of the line and then spent 30 years and untold billions making sure it never, ever fell behind. Every rival that stumbled for even one generation got left in the dust. The lead didn't shrink over time. It compounded. Now we get to the part that keeps governments awake at night. Fast forward to today. TSMC makes roughly 90% of the world's most advanced chips. Not 90% of one country. 90% of the entire planet's cutting-edge silicon, from one company, on one island. Fine, you say. If they're that important, just build another one somewhere safe. You can't. And this is the trap nobody saw coming. A single leading-edge chip factory costs around $20 billion. It takes years, and inside it sits a machine that carves patterns thinner than a virus, using light bounced-off mirrors so smooth that if you scaled one up to the size of Germany, the biggest bump would be a fraction of a millimeter. Exactly one company on Earth knows how to build that machine. A Dutch firm called ASML. Each one costs over $150 million. There's a waiting list. So look at the real supply chain. The whole modern world runs on advanced chips. Almost all advanced chips come from TSMC, and TSMC's most critical machines come from a single supplier who can't make them fast enough. That's not a chain, it's a single thread, and the entire global economy is hanging from it. Now add the detail that turns this from a business story into a thriller. That island is Taiwan, and another government, China, claims it as its own. Strategists even have a name for TSMC's role in all this. They call it the Silicon Shield. The logic is brutal and simple. Taiwan is so essential to the world economy that nobody can afford to let anything happen to it. The chips are the armor. Sit with that. The little glowing rectangle in your hand is quietly tangled up in one of the most dangerous standoffs on the planet. And if you think a chip shutdown is some far-off hypothetical, we already got a preview. In 2020 and 2021, the chip supply got squeezed. Not destroyed, just squeezed. And car makers, who'd treated chips as an afterthought, suddenly couldn't finish their cars. Brand new vehicles sat in giant parking lots, fully built, waiting on a single missing chip worth a few dollars. By some estimates, the auto industry alone lost over $200 billion that year. From a shortage, not a shutdown. So let's run the clock on the real thing. What happens if TSMC actually goes dark? Day 1. Chip orders stop. Nobody panics yet. Month 3. Factories making cars, phones, and laptops run out of parts. Production lines go silent. Prices climb. Year 1. Economists estimate losses well over $1 trillion a year. The AI boom stalls. New electronics get rare and expensive. Not because of a bank collapse or a war or an oil shock, but because one factory complex on one island stopped. That's not a company. That's a load-bearing wall for the entire global economy. Now let's be fair, because the obvious objection is actually a good one. The United States sees the risk, so does China. So why don't they just build their own TSMC at home and be done with it? They're trying hard. The US is pouring tens of billions into new fabs on its own soil. TSMC itself is building plants in Arizona, Japan and Germany too. On paper, the monopoly is starting to spread. But here's what all that money still can't buy fast: the know-how. Making chips at this level is not a recipe you can photocopy. It's 3 decades of accumulated, hard-won, mostly invisible knowledge. How to get billions of microscopic switches to come out flawless, batch after batch, day after day, with almost no fatal defects. Every serious rival who tried to match TSMC at the bleeding edge has quietly fallen a step behind. Money built the buildings. It couldn't buy the muscle memory. So, yes, slowly, the world is learning not to keep all its brains in one basket. New factories are rising. In 10 years, the map might look very different. But right now, today, as you watch this, the most advanced brain inside almost every device on Earth still comes, overwhelmingly, from one company most people have never heard of. So go back to the very start. The most important company in the world, it's not the one with the shiny logo on your phone. It's the one that built the thing inside the phone. Apple sells you the magic. Nvidia sells you the future. But both of them are standing on the shoulders of a quiet giant in Taiwan. A company that figured out the smartest move wasn't to make the products everyone wants. It was to become the one factory everyone needs. You thought you knew who runs the modern world. Turns out it's a name you'd never have guessed, and a factory you were never supposed to notice. If this just rewired how you look at that rectangle of glass in your hand, hit subscribe.